What happened when an undercover CEO stepped into his once thriving mountain resort branch and uncovered a hidden web of neglect, broken trust, and silent courage? Welcome back, thoughtful listeners. You have a rare gift for appreciating stories that honor hard work, resilience, and true leadership. Today's journey isn't just about repairing bikes or fixing trails. It's about restoring a legacy built on grit, respect, and integrity. If you believe that real leadership means standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who make success possible, you're in exactly the right place. Let's dive into a story where action speaks louder than words. Dane Whitaker stood at the edge of the old trailhead, the crisp morning air stirring memories that felt as real as the dirt beneath his boots. Years ago, this path had been nothing but a rugged game trail in a dream. No rental kiosks, no manicured signs, just Dane, a beat-up mountain bike, and a folding card table with a handwritten map. He remembered the early mornings tuning gears by flashlight, patching flat tires with duct tape, and guiding his first guests up the switchbacks with nothing more than a handshake and a promise, "Trust me, I'll get you there safely." That spirit built Peak Trails Outfitters into something bigger than he ever imagined. 12 bustling locations, a loyal customer base, and summer seasons booked out months in advance. Yet standing there now, watching a new line of SUVs pull into the Mount Vista parking lot, Dane couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Customer complaints had been trickling in, whispers at first, then louder. Bikes not ready, helmets missing, staff overwhelmed, safety overlooked. His executive team had reassured him with glowing spreadsheets and polished presentations, but Dane had lived long enough to know one truth. Numbers could lie. The gravel under his boots didn't. If a problem showed up 3 times, Dane had a rule. Don't call a meeting, go see for yourself. Now at 58 years old, with the company's reputation and his own legacy on the line, he decided it was time to get his hands dirty again. Not as the founder everyone recognized, but as a nameless seasonal hire. No fanfare, no safety net, just a clipboard, a toolbox, and an alias. Tom, the new guy. Because sometimes, to fix what's broken, you have to go back to where it all started. The Mount Vista branch looked picture-perfect from a distance. Bright banners flapping in the breeze, racks of gleaming mountain bikes lined up in neat rows. But as Dane Whitaker, now Tom the new hire, pulled into the gravel lot, he caught the first crack beneath the surface. A frustrated family stood at the counter, arguing about a reservation that had been misplaced. Inside the small lodge, the air conditioning was cranked so high it felt like a walk-in freezer. Behind the counter lounged Bryce Keller, the branch manager, thumbing through his phone with one hand and sipping from a jumbo iced coffee with the other. Bryce barely looked up as Dane approached. "You the temp?" he asked, his voice dripping with boredom. Dane nodded. Bryce smirked, eyeing Dane's scuffed boots and sun-creased face. "Figures they'd send me another project," he muttered, just loud enough for Dane to hear. Then, louder for the staff in earshot, "Maybe you'll last longer than the last charity case they dumped on me." Several younger employees looked up briefly, then dropped their heads. No one said a word. Bryce didn't bother with a tour or introductions. "Go find Logan out back. He's supposed to babysit you," he said, already returning to his phone. "Try not to break anything expensive." Out by the maintenance shed, Dane found Logan Pierce, a wiry kid no older than 20, battling with a bent derailleur on a rental bike. His hands were black with grease, sweat already plastering his shirt to his back. Logan glanced up, offering a brief, wary smile. "You must be Tom. Welcome to the circus," he said, only half joking. As Dane worked alongside Logan that morning, it became clear that the cracks weren't just in management's style. They were in the very bones of the operation. Helmets sat in a heap, unsorted and some damaged. Bike inspections were rushed, if done at all. Paperwork was shoved into drawers haphazardly. Worse, it seemed no one dared raise concerns. Bryce ruled the branch less like a manager and more like a petty king, rewarding favorites with easy shifts and mocking anyone who asked for help or mentioned safety protocols. When a young female employee hesitated to report a cracked helmet she'd found, Bryce sneered from his perch behind the counter. "You think a broken strap is going to kill someone? Relax, sweetheart, we're not running a hospital here." The girl flushed and quietly put the helmet back on the rack. By the end of the first day, Dane's hands were calloused and his jaw was tight. The equipment was rough, but the rot inside the culture was what worried him most. If this was the front lines of the empire he built, then it wasn't just a few bolts that needed tightening. It was the entire foundation. By mid-morning, the cracks at Mount Vista weren't just visible, they were gaping wounds. Dane followed Logan through the dusty back lot, where bikes meant for full-day trail rides sat neglected, many with underinflated tires, loose brakes, or damaged frames. Logan, sweating through his second shirt of the day, moved with grim efficiency, trying to triage the worst of it before customers arrived. No checklist, no parts inventory, no backup, just muscle memory and quiet desperation. At one point, Dane watched Logan pause over a kid's rental bike with a dangerously frayed brake cable. He hesitated only a second, then pulled it from the ready line and pushed it into the repair rack, even though he knew Bryce would sneer at him later for wasting inventory. Dane caught the flicker of defiance in the kid's jaw and felt something twist inside his chest. This wasn't just survival, it was silent courage. Inside the lodge, Sierra Holt fought a different kind of battle. She handled a growing line of impatient customers alone, flipping between reservation logs and a barely functioning payment system. When a father complained about missing child helmets, Sierra didn't make excuses. She ducked into the cluttered back closet, personally pulled out 2 worn spares and inspected them carefully herself. No shortcuts, no blame shifting. Once, after a heated phone call with an angry guest whose reservation had been lost, Dane caught her slipping outside behind the building. For a moment, she leaned against the cool siding, breathing deeply to steady herself, before walking back in with a smile for the next waiting family. Meanwhile, Bryce perched at the counter like a king surveying peasants, offering no help and quick to humiliate. When Logan quietly suggested tagging the bikes that needed repairs, Bryce laughed and said, "You're here to rent dreams, kid, not chase gremlins." The deeper Dane dug, the more he realized the real danger wasn't broken equipment, it was the way Bryce had trained everyone to accept failure as normal. Safety wasn't a protocol, it was a suggestion. Effort wasn't rewarded, it was ridiculed. And through it all, the young employees like Logan and Sierra kept showing up, patching the holes, standing between customers and catastrophe, with nothing but their own sense of right and wrong. By the time the sun slipped overhead, Dane's shirt was damp with sweat, and his mind raced with calculations. Not about money, but about the human cost of letting pride and profit blind leadership to the beating heart of a business. These weren't just kids punching clocks. They were the soul of peak trails. And they deserved better. The 4th of July weekend hit like a storm no one was ready for. By 8 a.m., the gravel lot was overflowing with SUVs and pickup trucks loaded with coolers, bikes, and eager families. Dane, still wearing the name tag, Tom, grabbed a clipboard and fell in beside Logan, who was already wiping down bikes at a frantic pace. It was immediately clear there weren't enough working rentals for the day's bookings. Tires were underinflated, chains squeaked with rust, and frames meant for moderate trails were being sent out on advanced paths without so much as a double check. Inside the lodge, Sierra manned the front desk alone, juggling 2 phone lines and a crowd of impatient customers demanding refunds or upgrades. Bryce, as always, remained parked behind his desk, fiddling with his phone, occasionally barking at Sierra for taking too long when processing rental. When one of the junior employees dared to suggest slowing down and inspecting bikes before releases, Bryce snapped, "If we stop to fix every little thing, we'll lose half the rentals. Keep moving or clock out." On the trails, the chaos multiplied. Dane spotted a father wrestling with a slipped chain halfway up the first switchback, his child's bike skidding behind him. A teenager came back from a morning ride with a gash on his arm after his front brake failed. Logan and Dane scrambled to help where they could, but it was like patching a sinking ship with duct tape. By noon, the gravel lot had turned into a heat-radiating pressure cooker of complaints, near misses, and rising tempers. Dane caught Sierra slipping into the supply shed again, this time visibly fighting back tears. He handed her a cold bottle of water without saying a word. There were small wins, sure, a bike repaired in time, a child's helmet replaced before a ride, but the overall feeling was grim. The idea that a few heroic efforts could save the day was a lie. The cracks were too wide. They had been left unattended for too long. Victory wouldn't come with a big speech or a dramatic turnaround. If this place was going to heal, it would be slow, painful work. One bike, one rider, one broken system at a time. Standing at the dock, watching exhausted families still queuing up, Dane understood something he hadn't fully admitted yet. Fixing peak trails wasn't about snapping his fingers and firing a bad manager. It was about rebuilding trust with every kid who buckled a helmet, every mom who watched her child ride off safe. And if he didn't stay the course, if he gave up when it got ugly, he'd lose not just the company, but everything it once stood for. The breaking point came late that afternoon when the heat hung over the lot like a wet blanket and tempers had frayed to threads. Dane was tightening a loose handlebar bolt when he heard the shriek, a high, sudden cry that cut straight through the noise. He turned sharply to see a small boy crumpled on the gravel, his rental bike tangled awkwardly beside him. The boy's father rushed over, furious and scared, scooping his son into his arms. The child's helmet had slipped sideways, one of the straps had frayed clean through. Dane sprinted over, heart pounding. Logan beat him there, kneeling gently beside the father, apologizing, checking the boy for injuries. Bryce, true to form, stayed planted in the shade near the counter, merely peering over his sunglasses before returning to his phone. No apology, no movement. The father, cradling his whimpering son, demanded to speak to a manager. Bryce finally sauntered over, his words as careless as his posture. "Kids fall. It's part of biking," he said with a shrug. Dane saw the father's jaw tighten, saw Sierra's hands clench around the check-in clipboard across the way. It wasn't just the accident, it was indifference. The clear message that safety didn't matter, that real human fear and pain were inconveniences to be brushed aside. Dane felt the shame crawl up his spine like fire ants. After the family left, still furious, but thankfully with only bruises to show, Dane pulled Logan aside, near the maintenance shed. "Has anything like that happened before?" he asked quietly. Logan hesitated, wiping sweat from his brow. "Couple months back, an older guy cracked a wrist after a brake lockup. Bryce made him sign a waiver before offering any help." Dane closed his eyes briefly. He had seen enough. This wasn't about bad luck. It wasn't about summer chaos. It was systemic negligence, an attitude that filtered from the top down, an attitude he had, unwittingly, allowed to fester by trusting numbers over people. He looked out at Sierra, still managing a growing line of frustrated customers, and Logan, wiping grease from his hands onto ripped jeans, and the rest of the exhausted, quietly heroic team. They deserved better. The guests deserved better. The company deserved better. Tomorrow, Dane decided, things would change. No more undercover, no more waiting. The time had come to put his name and his standards back on the line. The next morning, Dane arrived an hour before opening, the mountain air still cool against his skin. Bryce was in the lodge early too, but not working. He lounged behind the counter, a breakfast burrito in one hand and his phone in the other, blasting videos loud enough to echo off the pine walls. Logan and Sierra were already hustling outside, prepping bikes and calming down an irritable early arrival tour group without a single glance of support from their so-called man. Dane waited until Bryce barked a sarcastic comment across the lodge at Sierra. Something about, "Hurry up, sweetheart, you're not baking cookies." It was the last straw. Dane stepped forward, calm but firm, and closed the distance between them. "Bryce," he said evenly, "we need to talk. Now." Bryce didn't even look up right away. "If it's about your shift, save it. Temps don't get to complain." Dane reached across the counter and turned off the blaring phone. Bryce blinked in confusion, finally meeting Dane's gaze, and paused, sensing something had shifted. "I'm not Tom," Dane said quietly. "My name is Dane Whitaker. I built Peak Trails from nothing, and for the past week, I've been working under your nose." For a beat, the room was silent except for the whir of an overhead fan. Bryce's face paled, then flushed an angry red. "Wait, you're serious?" Dane nodded once. "Dead serious." He stepped around the counter and leveled his voice so that anyone nearby could hear. "I've seen how you run this branch. The neglected maintenance, the safety violations, the harassment, the theft of wages. I've spoken to the staff. I've watched guests get hurt. I've watched you humiliate the people holding this place together. You've failed every standard we stand for. And you've done it under my name." Bryce opened his mouth, but Dane cut him off with a sharp gesture. "You're fired. Effective immediately. Pack up. Dano Reynolds from Regional Management is already en route to take over the transition." Bryce sputtered something about misunderstanding, about summer stress and kids exaggerating, but it didn't matter. Dane didn't let him finish. "You're done here. Turn in your keys. Get out." As Bryce stumbled away toward the back office, still muttering under his breath, Dane turned to see Sierra and Logan standing frozen by the door, wide-eyed. Other employees hovered too, unsure if they were even allowed to breathe. Dane faced them fully. "There's going to be a meeting in 30 minutes, he said. "No scripts, no corporate jargon, just us. And we're going to talk about fixing what matters." For the first time in days, something like hope flickered in the room. 30 minutes later, the staff gathered outside under the tall pines near the maintenance shed, a rough circle of tired faces and weary glances. Dane stood at the center, not behind a desk or on a raised platform, but level with them. Just another set of dusty boots on the gravel. "I won't waste your time with speeches," Dane began, voice steady. "You already know the problems here better than I ever could. What matters now is what we do next, together." He turned first to Logan, who stood stiffly, arms crossed, grease still smudging his knuckles. "Logan, starting today, you're promoted to lead mechanic. Full certification training is on me. We'll get you properly equipped and supported, not just to fix bikes, but to lead repairs across the region if you want it." Logan blinked, caught completely off guard, then nodded once, his face a careful mask that couldn't hide the surge of pride beneath. Dane then turned to Sierra. "You're promoted to front desk supervisor, effective immediately. We're back paying every missing hour, and your approved vacation request is reinstated, with bonus time for what you've endured." Sierra's hands trembled slightly as she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, nodding mutely. "Next," Dane continued, addressing the whole group. "Chris Madden, a retired trail safety ranger, will be joining us to overhaul our safety protocols. Every bike, every helmet, every trail release will be double-checked. Not because of some insurance requirement, but because it's the right thing to do." He paused, letting the words settle into the warm morning air. "No more cutting corners. No more looking the other way. If you see something wrong, you speak up, and you will be heard." Finally, he pulled a folded sheet from his pocket. "Starting this month, every branch, beginning with this one, will have a monthly feedback forum, anonymous if you choose. Hiring decisions, equipment upgrades, even scheduling will be shaped by the people who live it every day. You." There was a murmur through the group, a ripple of disbelief followed by cautious hope. Dane smiled, but it was a small, serious thing. "I built Peak Trails on trust, grit, and respect. Somewhere along the way we let that slip. But if you're willing, we're going to rebuild it. Not with slogans or rules, but with action." He took a step back, scanning the faces before him, faces no longer guarded but beginning to lift. "Let's get to work," he said simply. And for the first time in too long, it felt like everyone was ready to. The days that followed weren't perfect. In fact, they were some of the hardest work Dane could remember since the early years of Peak Trails. Mistakes still happened. Trail maps went missing, bikes were double booked, a family got the wrong size helmets and had to be re-outfitted. But for the first time, those mistakes weren't met with blame or silence. They were met with quick hands, honest apologies, and a team willing to learn and adapt together. Logan set up a simple maintenance log by the shed. a whiteboard with columns for bikes needing work, parts ordered, and inspections completed. It wasn't fancy, but it worked, and for the first time, Logan didn't have to fix everything alone. Marcus, the new Marine tech, and Chris Madden, the safety ranger, worked side by side with him, offering advice, laughing quietly over stubborn bolts, showing Logan tricks they'd learned over decades. Sierra took charge inside the lodge, quietly rearranging the reservation desk for smoother traffic flow, training new hires with patience she had never been given herself. Guests noticed, complaints slowed, then almost stopped entirely. More importantly, when something did go wrong, the staff didn't hide it, they handled it. Midway through the week, a family approached the counter asking for Sierra by name, to thank her personally for helping their nervous child adjust to his first trail ride. She blinked back tears after they left, the praise foreign after so many months of being invisible. Dane watched it all quietly, not issuing orders but pitching in, holding bike steady while Logan swapped tires, grabbing tools from the shed, hauling water bottles to overheated staff. Every grease stain on his hands felt like a prayer answered, a bond reforged. One evening, after closing, Dane stood alone by the trailhead as the last streaks of sunset brushed the mountains in gold. He watched Logan and Sierra lock up for the night, laughing about something he couldn't hear, their faces tired but light in a way they hadn't been before. In the stillness, Dane noticed a small American flag, tattered but proud, fluttering from the corner of the old gear shed. Probably forgotten by a camper weeks ago. Without thinking, he walked over and secured it properly against the pole, his hands steady. It wasn't about profits or spreadsheets anymore. It never had been. It was about honoring the trust that had built this place. One dusty boot print, one patched tire, one stubborn act of faith at a time. And standing there, under the wide, aching sky, Dane Whitaker realized something simple and powerful. The soul of Peak Trails had never been the buildings or the equipment. It had always been the people, brave enough to care when no one else did. Late Thursday afternoon, just as the dust of the day's last bike returns was settling, a white government SUV rolled into the lot. A man in khakis and a button-down shirt stepped out, clipboard in hand, the official seal of the National Park Service stitched onto his sleeve. Dane, wiping grease from his hands, exchanged a look with Sierra and Logan. They all knew what this was. The scheduled safety audit. The one Bryce had likely ignored, assuming no one would notice. Dane met the inspector at the trailhead entrance. "Good afternoon," he said, offering his hand. "Dane Whitaker. I'm the site owner." The inspector gave a brief nod. "Routine check. Shouldn't take long." But his sharp eyes missed nothing as he moved through the property. He asked to see the equipment logs. Logan and Chris produced them, neatly organized, hand-checked, with notes and signatures for every bike rented that week. He counted life jackets and first aid kits. He checked tire pressures on random bikes, inspected helmets, even spot-checked trail signage for compliance. Sierra answered questions about the reservation system with calm efficiency, while new hires demonstrated emergency procedures they'd learned from Chris just days earlier. After an hour, the inspector flipped his clipboard closed and straightened, surveying the grounds. He looked at the clean maintenance shed, the newly posted emergency protocols, the staff moving with quiet purpose. "You don't usually see this level of engagement at seasonal rental operations," he said finally, a note of genuine respect in his voice. "Most of these places just try to survive the summer. You're doing more than that." Dane felt a tightness in his chest ease for the first time in weeks. "We're not just renting bikes," he said simply. "We're sending people out into the wild. They trust us with their safety. That means something." The inspector nodded. "Whatever you're doing here, keep doing it." As the SUV pulled away, leaving a trail of dust behind, Dane turned back toward the lodge where Logan was patching a tire and Sierra was laughing with a group of departing guests. The world might not see the small battles they fought every day, but Dane did. And finally it felt like they were winning them for the right reasons. That evening, as the last traces of sunlight melted behind the mountains, Dane Whitaker stood alone at the edge of the trailhead, breathing in the cool, pine-scented air. The lodge behind him buzzed with quiet energy, Logan tinkering with a stubborn derailleur, Sierra closing out the day's logbooks with a satisfied hum. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't flawless, but it was honest. Peak Trails wasn't just surviving anymore, it was becoming something stronger, something earned. Not through mandates or slogans, but through the simple, stubborn acts of people who cared enough to stay, to fix, to believe that work done right still mattered. Dane glanced over at the small American flag fluttering over the shed, its edges frayed but steadfast. He smiled faintly. That flag, like this place, wasn't perfect. It had weathered storms, neglect, and careless hands. But it was still standing. He tucked his hands into his jacket pockets and looked out over the dusky ridgeline. There was still work ahead, still mistakes to be made and lessons to learn, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was carrying it alone. They were building something real again, and this time it was built to last. At its core, the story of Peak Trails Outfitters reminds us that leadership isn't about titles or balance sheets, it's about responsibility to the people who trust you, both customers and employees alike. Dane Whitaker's journey back to the front lines revealed a simple but powerful truth. When organizations lose touch with the everyday struggles of their workers, they lose their soul. The real strength of a business isn't built in boardrooms, it's built in maintenance sheds, front desks, and trailheads, where the quiet, unseen efforts of hardworking people make or break trust. Dane's decision to step out from behind spreadsheets and into the dirt alongside his team showed that rebuilding starts not with policies but with personal accountability and action. The lesson is clear. Respect is earned daily, not declared. Real change happens slowly, messily, and only when leaders are willing to listen, serve, and repair what's broken without ego. True leadership means protecting the dignity of work, valuing every hand that helps build something lasting, and never forgetting the grit and heart that turn dreams into something real. In the end, it's not the empire you build that defines you, it's how you care for the people who carry it forward.